this evening's live chat, in which, although I don't normally talk about current affairs, it's going to be about the Polish general election. And actually, it's not fair to say I don't talk about current affairs. Most everything I do is about current affairs when I think about it, because I compare the past with the present. And I think that's what I'll do tonight. So I'll give you a little bit of analysis, and I'll try and put it into some form of historical perspective and the reasons why things have happened. Yesterday, there was a general election in Poland. And as of half an hour ago, I can give you the vote results so far. So the current governing party, which is called Law and Justice, it should be called Law and Justice in inverted commas, they got 36.4% of the vote. Koalicja Obywatelska. Sorry, as the Civic Coalition, which is the Liberal Progressive Party, got just under 30%. Something called the Third Way got 14.5%. Now the Third Way is an even more liberal progressive party. The left 8.4%, and there's a neo-Nazi party called Konfederacja, and they got 7.2, which is quite shocking, really, considering that so many people could have voted for a party which is so more viciously anti-Semitic, amongst other things. But anyway, that's what they got. So now the situation at present looks as though the current government is out. Even though it got the most votes, the three other parties which came in behind it are all prepared to do a deal amongst themselves, and it was quite clear that they were working amongst themselves beforehand, and so that is out. In the year 2010, after the British general election, I did a video which I put on YouTube and which you can still find, arguing that the Gordon Brown from the Labour Party ought to be given first choice to form a government. And I was doing that based on the British principle, which had been set in 1924 when the first Labour government came in. And that the first choice should go to form a government should go to the party which had the most votes. As it happened in 2010, Gordon didn't get the opportunity to form the government because he extremely gentlemanly actually stood down, and he allowed, said the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party are trying to come to an agreement between themselves, and he said let them have a go at it, see what it comes to. And which, looking back on it, is incredibly. I thought that was, I think, really very. I don't know what the word is. Very nice thing to do. So that's it. So now. In Poland, I read the constitution this morning. Obviously, I've got nothing better to do with my time, and then I also read some analysis, and including that of what former President Kwasniewski, who found himself in a similar position, and what his analysis of this was, and so therefore the so what must happen now is that the president, who is a political figure, now in Poland every single president has been from a party. In 1958, the French Fifth Republic, magnanimous, yeah, that's the good word, Colin, sorry, right, so Gordon Brown was very magnanimous. I also noticed that Brian says that my political bias is coming through. Let Brian say what he believes my political bias to be. And so just out of curiosity, hello David. So in 1958, the French Fifth Republic, I studied the Constitution of France at university, and so because I think the French Constitution is the best, but that's because it's the one I know the best. And
therefore, the idea of de Gaulle was that the president should be above politics, and he should be certainly that the whole that can unite the entire country. Now, this is when I spoke about the monarchy in the United Kingdom. This is one of the reasons I'm sort of in favour of the monarchy, and. So Brian thinks I'm opposed to Gordon Brown because the word I was looking for regarding Gordon Brown is stupid. So therefore, Brian thinks that my bias is coming through, that I am opposed to Gordon Brown. Right, well, maybe I'll say, maybe Brian could now say, who does he think I was in favour of in that election? Who does Brian think I voted for in the year 2010? That would have been, I will reveal the answer. See if Brian's opinion of my political bias is correct or not. Right, so I forgot what I was going to say now. So the idea of having the royal family is what I really thought the Queen was really very good on this, because she was really very, very, very neutral. And so, as daft as it may seem to have a royal family, this is one of the benefits. And apart from that, it does, of course, give people something to talk about and something for the colour magazines, something to write about the scandals all around them. So now in Poland, every single figurehead, yes, every single president has come from a party. Now, in 1989, okay, we'll go back a bit further than that. We'll go back a lot further now. Poland became was set up in 1919 as a okay, sorry. Okay, I'll just a minute. I will answer the Brian's point here. So as Brian says, peace is an inverted commas clear bias. Law and justice, well, hardly, because they are they represent neither law nor justice, which I shall state. And confederati, well, if Brian thinks that vicious anti-Semitic comments, for example, are saying that Jews should have a yellow star or something on them today, and that does strike me as being neo-Nazi. But maybe Brian thinks that is not my words. You can go on their website, you can see it for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. And anyway, so Poland set up as an independent country in 1919 as a result of the Treaty of Versailles in 1920. Initially, it was sort of a multi-party democracy. Didn't really work out. So in 1926, there was a coup d'état, and it formed a form of fascism, I suppose, which got sort of gradually. I mean, most countries were fascist. That was the flavour of the time. And nonetheless, there were elections in Poland, and there was a sort of procedure with the law. I mean, the law sort of got worse after the death of Pilsudski in 1935, and then it became a sort of some author wrote it was a military. It was a dictatorship without a dictator. And anyway, so then there was the occupation. Nazis occupied it, and the communists occupied it. So in 1989, there was, now bear in mind, the Soviet Union was still in existence, and the communist government actually had what was called got together with people from the opposition. One of the people who was in the talks with the government is a friend of mine, and indeed I communicated with her yesterday over this, and they came to an agreement whereby there would be power sharing. And as much as I didn't like very much the government of the communists, I've got to say this was a really it was a very far-sighted thing. And as much as I thought that the communist the Communist Party had all the crimes that had done and all the rest of it in the past, the fact that Jaruzelski was prepared to hand over power, in part, I think he did head off potential other problems. Anyway, so there were two houses of parliament, one of which was partially elected, and the other one was completely elected. But what happened was some of the communists actually went over to the opposition. Still under Soviet occupation, there was now a government which was non-communist, and okay, so then the Soviet bloc fell apart.
there were elections. It's strange actually that yesterday's election had a higher turnout than the election of the first elections in Poland. It was, I mean, anyway, that apart. But then there was the thing, the argument, what sort of government would take Lech Wałęsa, who became the president. He was in favor of a presidential type system, like, for example, the United States is a very good example of a presidential type system, and others were probably in the opposition, who were more parliamentarian. A parliamentary system is where you don't know who the president is usually, and anyway, so there was a constitution was proposed, which was voted on. I think the year was 1996 referendum, and so there's a new constitution which replaced the previous one, and so that came into force. Now, with new democracies, what tends to happen is that it's largely based around parties are based around a personality. Now, I'm going to use Ukraine because this is the probably the best example which people know of nowadays. So you've got the party of the ruling party now, which is Servant of the People, to translate it from Ukrainian, which is based around Mr. Zelensky, and the opposition party, which is based around Mr. Poroshenko. And perhaps neither party would, when they sort of go off to make chocolate again or go back into acting or whatever, then the parties will no longer exist and they'll have some other name, or something like that. And that is largely what happened in Poland. This is a normal procedure which happens in many places. I mean, Putin's got really clever by not having his party is okay. He does have a party, but it's not really. The party was not so much based around him as he was based around the party. I think he's far more important. Anyway. So David asked about the church. Now, unfortunately, the church has a great deal of power, and it is the church. You get the priests in the small villages will tell people who to vote for. I once went to the church, and with a woman I was then with, and I heard the priest telling people who to vote for. And so I mean, that happens. I mean, it probably doesn't happen in the larger cities, but it certainly does happen in the smaller ones. Now, the advantage for those right-wing parties, or those parties which are supported by the church, is that people go, the elections held on a Sunday, people then in the villages then go from the church to vote. So that's the procedure. So that means to say that to get the church on your side is quite important. Of course, as people get younger, people don't go to church, and so this is older people. Things like this, and as we see, for example, in Slovakia, it's older people that tend to vote. Now, we had. Is very, very quickly, it was the former communist party which has sort of reformed itself, and that happened everywhere in Eastern Europe as well. They came back to power, and this happened in many countries where the former thing is that they weren't really very, very communist as such, other than the corruption that surrounded them. So they went into things progressed normally, and then there was then the other lot were back, and then so it was this type of system. Now, the current ruling party in Poland is called Law and Justice. Now, this was formed around 2003, I think it was. I seem to recall there was the sort of the right-wing part of conservative or parties sort of broke up. They split up into various groups, and so those who were more conservative, if you like, but they still believed in things like state control of industry and made up largely of former communists. This is one thing which needs to be pointed out very clearly. And one thing now I have to say, albeit though Brian's saying that I'm biased, but I was a hardcore anti-communist. I think that's pretty clear from my CV. But I would have to admit that communism did have a certain amount of popularity, and it did this. There were people who benefited from communism, and I don't mean just the corrupt apparatchiks who benefited from it, but there were people in the countryside who benefit from communism. For example, if communism was oppressed, largely it is the urban working class. They were the ones who had to work very long hours for no reason at all. Whereas it's the people in the countryside who could actually benefit from the system. And the reason they could benefit from the system is largely due to the fact that collective farms were introduced, and these collective farms, which were, because they were collective and because they were, again, it's a person who was made a head of a collective farm because he was a communist apparatchik. It wasn't because he knew how to breed pigs or something. And so they weren't able to produce the food. So those who were in the countryside who could produce food were those who actually made money. In 1980, I think it was about 3/4 of all food production in Poland was still in private hands. I remember seeing a program on World National Panorama or something like that around that time, showing how it was. Now, I can recall the price that people would buy, for example, a pig, and then they would keep it in their freezer. Sorry, they'd chop it up first and then put it in the freezer. And now it was in 1982. The communist regime made it illegal to sell meat on the private market, so but it doesn't matter because everybody did it anyway. Not only that, it was quite clear where you could actually buy things from. So there was a free market, and there was the state market. And now the state market had the state prices, so therefore nothing ended up there. It all ended up on the free market. This is a problem of communism, which dates back from the very beginning. In 1920, there was a British journalist, or 1919, there's a book called Russia in 1920, or Russia in 1919, I can't remember the name of the title, but I've read it 3 times as well. And this book, in the book, the journalist is speaking to, I think it's Zinoviev. And Zinoviev is when he says, well, the problem's this, is that until the peasants can understand that they've got to get into socialism, and then instead of selling their eggs at 20 kopecks, start selling them at 3 kopecks, which is the intervention price of the state, and then we'll have socialism. But of course, I mean, why should the peasant sell something at 3 kopecks when he can get 20 kopecks for it? And then the poor peasant who's got to pay for the other stuff, he's got to feed them chickens, and so he's got to pay whatever it is. He's not buying the chicken food at the intervention price, and that is where communism doesn't work. And so anyway, so those producing food in Poland could, I mean, they might say they're anti-communist, but they did better about the system. Now, I can recall my neighbor where I was living, and he was absolutely, utterly against the communist system. But he had the first ever CD player that if you remember them, the first ever CD player I ever saw was at his place. He had an incredible collection of records. He was theoretically earning what was 5,000 zloty, which was what then about, on the free market, there was, I'm trying to remember now, I can't remember the exchange rate. It was about 1,500 to the pound, something like about £3 a month or something like that. But he had all this stuff. Why? Because he knew how to use the system. That is why. And so this was the thing. So you've got the, I don't like to use the word black market, because black markets, I perceive the word black market, I mean something which is illegal, like selling drugs or something. So I use the word free market. There's a free market and there's the communist market, the state market. So there were people who did better. Now, once the free market came in, once after the end of socialism, then he got considerably poorer, considerably. He was no longer able to afford the luxuries that he'd had before. He had benefited from the communist system. I can think of other friends of mine. I mean, these aren't people I knew under socialism, but I mean, when as a woman I met, and I went and met a family, I stayed there, and all the rest of it, and so she was about the same age as me, more or less, and so all their stuff was from the early 80s. I mean, they'd gone to the factory to buy his Mercedes in Stuttgart in 1978. So he still was driving this 20 years later. He was still driving this vehicle. So because he traded with other people, they couldn't actually convert from this trading that they'd done in the then to the reality outside of this. Now, to a large extent, the support for peace comes from unregulated market. Well, yeah, unregulated market, I could say, is free market, but I don't like that word either, because unregulated, there are reasons why things might have to be regulated. For example, you don't want to start, if food markets aren't regulated, then you can start eating poisons and things like that, or the financial markets have to have certain regulations to stop things like what happened in 2008 happening. So there are so I don't think regulate. I'd rather say free market, but I mean, I do appreciate, you could say, well, drugs are sold on the free market, aren't they? Well, maybe not, but anyway, I think that's a bit of a semantic argument. So the support for communism as such tended to come from the villagers and things of this nature. Another thing which one has to bear in mind is that many people, the older people who might have remembered what it was like before the war, and then the communism actually raised their standard of living. I wouldn't say there was huge amounts of people in this category, but there were some. And so people could remember the poverty of the 30s, for example, which I need to point out that for those of us who lived in industrial areas, or come from industrial areas, who heard the stories of the poverty. I mean, where I come from, there was a lot of poverty in the 1930s. So I grew up with these stories. On the land or in new industries, there wasn't such great poverty. So to take a British example, if you went to somewhere like Birmingham or somewhere like that, there wasn't this. In the 30s, this was a time of boom because of the new technologies and automotive and radios and things, new technologies that existed then. So there was people who did benefit from social. And there's another thing that needs to be pointed out about this, is despite the failures of the communist system to produce goods, which is the reason why it collapsed, one has the fact that people had stability. So let's supposing you were born in, you're going to retire in 1989. You were born in 1929, let's say. So you'd remember the war, and then you get a job, and then you go to your job, and you stay with your job throughout your life, and then you retire. So what you had was a job. You never had to worry about things. And there were certain things that the communists supply. I mean, there was a free education. And you may think, what's the point of getting educated if you can't do anything with it afterwards? Well, that would be a very good argument. And the next thing was there was theoretically free medical care. I say theoretically because the medical system was very corrupt. I mean, indeed, I remember an article, I think it was in for Prost in 1998, said who people regard as being the most corrupt, and they said it was doctors. Get a doctor, you want to have a week off work, but you just go and give the doctor some cash, and then you've got a permit to have a week off work. But these things were theoretically free. And we often hear, in Cuba, say how wonderful it is in Cuba, or those with left leanings may say this.
And well, I don't know how good the Cuban medical system is, but I suspect that it may be a system where it is free, but you can't actually get anything. Or if you really need something, then you have to pay for it. And I would say to a certain extent, that is the way it was in Poland. To a certain extent, clearly, I mean, obviously for me, you know, seeing you know, UK, I mean, people do criticize them. I think the British system is really very, very good. And so to compare it to a British system. But I mean, having said that, it's, health is everywhere. I mean, the Collins just made a really good point there that doctors are not paid well in Poland. That's absolutely true. I mean, there's some people they have to work in the private sector to actually get better to actually get better. And this was even more the case. I can recall something, to give you an example, when the Hotel Marriott was set up in the mid-90s, and I attended a talk there from somebody. This is about nearly 30 years ago. Oh no, sorry, no, I'm exaggerating a bit. 25 years ago, somebody actually he set up so when the Marriott set up, well, there were some things that they demanded, and one was that they had no experience. For example, and you'd have, for example, the people working in the gym were often, or all of them were doctors, and because they could actually earn a proper wage. So it stands to reason. I mean, what's the point of going to medical school for 4 or 5 years and doing, and with all the responsibilities that doctors have, and then you know you're earning a really awful wage. And I mean, I think that is to be understood. Now, so what peace represent? People, their electorate comes from largely people who look back on communism and say, well, it was better then. We conservative as in we conservative as in communist. If you like, under communism it wasn't so bad. It was better because your life was sort of planned out, planned economy. And David says doctors have high status. Yes, certainly they do. They do. They're very. I would say, yeah. I can recall the way that the people looked up on doctors even before, and the English language doesn't have a way of addressing a doctor. That's why I say doctor, but it doesn't have the same feeling towards it as you say, Mr. Doctor or Sir Doctor or whatever. So that's the people who looked on. They were better off under communism for whatever reason, or it's because of the communism which was planned. And not only that, you've got the church as well, which is directing people towards to telling them who to actually vote for. Now the thing is, many of these politicians, though, from peace, very few of them were in the opposition to communism. Very, very few. So now what you have, admittedly, communism was 30 years ago. No, more than 30 years ago. What am I saying? 35 years ago. And so you've got these. So people who were in the opposition then are in, well, 2 days ago were in the opposition now. Those who supported the communist regime are largely supporters of peace, and this is really a very important thing, which and this is one of the absurdities and of the double think. So you have to think twice. So I'll give you some examples. The person responsible for the attacks on the democratic system, which happened under the previous government, so attacking the the judges and all the rest, judges, for example, the legal system, or trying to do things which were contrary to the constitution, was a person called Piotrkowski, and he was a former communist prosecutor. So he had been person who put trade union activists and other people opposed to the communist system. He'd actually prosecuted them, and he'd been very active in their
prosecutions. So we and there's even another person, the name of whom now escapes me, but the former president Bronisław Komorowski, he was put in prison by a judge who later became a peace senator. And so we have the absurd situation where this peace senator who's claiming now that those he had put in prison are communists or were communists when he himself had been a communist and he was claimed to have been anti-communist. It's a complete double think around this. I think that older people may actually recognize this to a certain extent. One thing that I noticed, whereas I possibly would have I did support them peace. I thought I was opposed to. I saw, when I was in business in the 20 years ago. I mean, you saw lots of things with corruption. I mean, it didn't have to even be in business. You used to get stopped by the police for no reason at all when you're driving. I mean, you might have done it, if you'd gone over the speed limit, and they'd have every right to stop you and fine you. But then there would be a it's fine. In the 90s, if you want to get a telephone line, then you had to pay people money and things like this. So there was this corruption which was around it. But I saw when Lech Kaczynski became mayor of Warsaw in 2004, wasn't it? I saw the amount of corruption that then suddenly people wanted to get building projects done or anything like that. And whereas it previously just put your papers in, and then suddenly, bang, there was all these problems. And this to me has always been the problem with peace, because there's been corruption and political corruption. And one thing that we've seen recently, for example, is the amount of jobs for the boys. So there was even a case in August where the husband of a peace member of parliament, he was given a job in the main fuel company, which obviously state owned. And another peace senator, he was asked on television, he said he couldn't see anything wrong with it. He could not see this type of corruption of giving jobs to your friends, to your party activists and things of this nature. Now, in 2001, the SLD, which was the Reformed Ex-Communist Party, won the elections, and Leszek Miller, who was the boss of the party, said, well, we won the elections, therefore we will decide who gets what jobs in state-owned companies. I'm paraphrasing, but it's more or less that what he said. And this is the problem when things are state-owned. It leads to corruption. And now it wouldn't be a problem if they were giving it to somebody who knows what they're doing, but they don't. And it's usually the case that then these state-owned companies, which could be paying taxes and working efficiently and employing people, then start to fall to pieces and need government funds to keep them up because they have bad management. And this is the nepotism. Yeah, it's the nepotism has been, I would say, it's been horrendous that's happened recently. I mean, in the last, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, you can see it's constantly happening. When you get one of the largest arms manufacturers in the country going to a 26-year-old community center worker, and his previous his only qualification was that he was a member of the ruling party. You had one of the most successful horse farms in Janów Podlaski, which went under because, again, you had the corruption of going into not somebody who knows about horse farms, but somebody whose only qualification was the fact that he was a member of the party. This is what happens under communism, and you can see this over and over and over again. And this is not just in Poland. One of the things which happened in Russia, whereas Russia led to this oligarch system, was when it came to the privatization of assets, they were not given to people or companies that knew what they were doing. Imagine if they'd given the oil sector, I'll use this as an example, if they put this up for sale, and some international companies, Shell and BP and Exxon and all the rest, they could have bid for the shares in these companies. Then what would have happened is that these shares sold to foreigners, but the resources, a large part of those resources would have stayed in Russia. And these companies, which are governed by corporate governance, which is that would have benefited Russia. And what's happened instead is that these resources have been taken out of Russia, they've gone abroad, and so they, instead of helping the local economies, they may be helping the British real estate economy by blocks of expensive flats in London and New York and Geneva and places, but it's not helping the locals. And that this is one of the things which can happen by creating oligarchs. And what peace clearly wanted to do was to create a system of oligarchs, which of course would have been their own party functionaries. Now, Colin's just mentioned that BP had a very large part of Rosneft. I can't quite recall. It doesn't have it any longer, and the losses were. I think that BP's actually now put its losses in the losses are now appeared in last year's corporate report, if I remember correctly on that one. Anyway, I think, though, I mean, that's my economic dislike of peace, but it's due to the corruption. But I mean, what people saw was the attacks on the judiciary, the attacks, the blatant abuse of power. We've seen attacks on women's rights. For example, abortions are now almost impossible in Poland. I mean, BP wrote it off. Yeah, that's what I should have said. And these are things which people have said, and this has largely been because of the churches. I mean, another thing which happened was that the shops couldn't open on a Sunday. Well, I mean, the thing is, my way of thinking is that shops should be open when people are free. So if somebody passed a law saying that shops have to be closed on a Monday, that makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. So if you want to give shop workers a day off, give them it on Monday or give it on Tuesday. This, I think, was something which was forced through by the extreme elements in the church. And on the subject, thanks, Mohammed. And on the subject of the churches, yet another thing is the way that the church interferes with the education system. And this, to me, I'll try not to say this very quickly, because this is one of the things that really gets me going. But I won't go on too much on this. But there's an utter plague of pedophilia in this country, and sorry, in this country. I'm not in Poland right now. I'm in Germany. But this is horrendous, and the worst. Everybody knows of a paedophile priest, and the worst punishment that a paedophile priest can get is to be sent to the next another diocese. So you can commit the same crimes there. Now, to my way of thinking, there's a very simple answer: just don't give them access to kids, and that's it. Stopped. No problem has been resolved. And but of course that's not possible. So this is justice. Law and justice is to actually send the paedophile priest to another diocese where he can start all over again. So these are sort of these things which really bother me. I need to point out, though, despite everything, that this government did initially show a great deal of support for Ukraine. Not only that, it made it relatively easy for Ukrainian citizens. Something like possibly as many as 8 million Ukrainians transited through Poland. Then we have been 3.5-4 million Ukrainians in Poland. That 1 person in 10 in the pot of the population was Ukrainian, and so therefore
this type of support was really good. It needs to be pointed out though that this was driven from below. It wasn't sort of driven from above, but the Polish government did support the Ukraine, did give weapons to Ukraine. It was one of the first countries to give Ukraine weapons. I mean, I did criticize in a video I did a year and a half ago about not giving the military planes, which I think it should have done. It should have just given the directly. It tried to sort of get the United States to give them to Ukraine, which didn't make much sense. But then it stopped. And it made up some rather ridiculous story about grain transports. Strangely enough, somebody published on Facebook that the story of this is that there were grain. Ukraine can't export its grain. It couldn't because of the terrorist attacks coming from the Russian Federation. So instead, these things went through Poland. I think I did a video. Didn't I stand by the grain? I can't remember if I actually did that as a live. Maybe I didn't do it as a live. Maybe it's still waiting to be uploaded. Can't remember. But anyway, so I stood by the grain terminal and filmed it. Anyway, so Poland stopped this coming through. I mean, and why? Because the government claimed that this was depressing the prices in Poland. Now, if it is a case that Ukrainian grain doesn't meet EU standards, then okay, that would, to a certain extent, that might have my support. But what would have to be, I don't know how it's transited, but normally if you've got goods which are transited from one country to another, if you want to, for example, if you're living in the United States and you want to send something to Costa Rica, what will happen when you get to the Mexican border, it will be, you'll get a plombovana, what's that in English? Sealed. That's it. You get a seal on it, click, and then next see you've got the seal, so you'll drive through. Now I don't know what happens on the Mexican border with Guatemala, but I suspect that what they'll do is they'll have a look. Aha, it's got a seal on it, and just keep going through. So that is how something transits through. So as far as the governments in Mexico, Guatemala, and Nicaragua are concerned, your goods are just transited through because it's been sealed. Now, I imagine that Ukrainian grain was sealed, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know. But the claim was by the government that the Ukrainian grain was coming to Poland and flooding the market. Now, I'm not saying that isn't the case because I don't know, but what I do know is that bread prices rose by far more than the price of the rate of inflation. And if it were true that it was flooding the market, then bread prices logically would have gone down a bit. I do appreciate the price of grain isn't the only factor in bread prices, but it is a significant amount. So, now, somebody posted on Facebook with a list of companies which were involved in with the trade of the Ukrainian grain. And strangely enough, of the 20 of them, 16 were parties, businesses related to politicians relying to law and justice. Now, the thing was, there was a lot of names not missing, so I don't know if it's entirely true. I was just a bit of false information put out. Now, Colin does mention that the bakers might have been taking the margin. They might have been. I don't know. I didn't do a study of it. I just know that the prices are higher. There could have been another reason. I don't know. I'm not even a regular eater of bread. In any case, so anyway, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's some other logical explanation. So, on the whole, now what they did do is this governing party is they introduced a system of social security, which hadn't existed before. So, They introduced a child benefit. Every single child, I think it was on the second child who was born, would receive a 500 zloty, which is approximately 110 euros. So this is one of per month. And this is one of the highest rates. I think only Italy has a higher. So I read, because I don't know what the child benefits are in other countries, but I read only Italy has a higher rate of a child benefit. Now, this clearly for poorer people, this was a great assistance to them. I mean, if you've got 6 kids and you were on the bread line, suddenly you've got this massive windfall of cash coming in, which in a case like that could have even trebled your monthly income. So obviously you're going to support somebody that does that in Poland. As Colin just was pointing out, there's a negative increase. That's a decrease, isn't a negative increase. The population is actually theoretically dropping in Poland, but this is normal in any country where people don't want to have kids. They'd rather have cash and go out and enjoy themselves rather than replicate. That stands to reason. And I think that this, I can recall, for example, the argument, so again, once more referring to France, the argument was that there was a prime de naissance, a money that you got when your kids were born, and particularly on the third one, there was a big payment in France, and the argument at the time was, yeah, we'll give it'll pay for a nice coat for the mummy, but it won't encourage people to have more children. So that is, I don't think that there's a link between giving social security and having children. I don't think people actually do it that way. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But this is one of the things that made them popular, and so there was this is the fact that they were quite happy to hand out money on this nature. Another thing actually was on the armed forces, that the armed forces have seen an increase under this government. Now they did introduce a territorial army, and now the thing was, at the time was thought it was even they wanted to actually start giving. There was even a suggestion that they wanted to start giving these like sort of soccer hooligans and things guns, and that didn't actually. It was called them patriots. Sorry, I should point out. That didn't come out, but the territorial army has grown to some extent. Anyway, so I went up with them one weekend. And I was expecting them all to be sort of peace supporters. None of them were. Nobody was where I was. So, in fact, they probably thought I was more. So another thing I also want to point about the Ukrainians, that the Ukrainians got the same benefits as Polish people. So this 500 zloty was paid to Ukrainians. So if you crossed the border with 5 kids from Ukraine, you got paid for those 5 kids. And there was, I don't know, I think Peace actually proposed they were going to halve the aid for Ukrainians in the future. I think it needs to be pointed out that there are Ukrainian people who don't want to go back to Ukraine as well, so that they would actually stay. At the same time, I need to point out that I did see a study that was pointed that showed that the Ukrainians were a benefit to the economy in the same way as that, for example, the Polish people in the United Kingdom are net contributors to this wave of emigration that took place to the United Kingdom from 2004, and certainly that's the case because jobs can't get done now that a lot of people have left. So also I actually worked in an area in 2015 which was an apple producing area, and so fruit growing, and that everybody who worked in the fields was from Ukraine. Indeed, amongst ourselves, we spoke in Polish, but the lingua franca was Russian. So, so if we were speaking to each other and want the others to understand, then we'd speak in Russian. So there always were lots of people, but there was a scandal. There has been a scandal. If you look at the amount of immigration to the European Union. You will notice that in Poland last year it was something like 10 times more than to Germany. The reason for this was it seems that certain people within the current, the still current administration had been selling off visas to people who possibly weren't entitled to actually get them, and that to my way of thinking, it's like, okay, well, they benefit both ways. They take money from the immigrant, and then they turn around and say, look, well, all these immigrants are coming here, better vote for us, and by the way, send me some money, help me do it. There's another thing which happened last year, was sorry, just before the invasion, was 2 years ago now, of Ukraine, is that Lukashenko tried to using this by taking immigrants in from largely from Iraq, but also from some African countries, and try to then smuggle them through Poland. And the Polish, this is extremely obviously difficult situation. These immigrants were coming through illegally and therefore had to be stopped. And this is something which the peace used, is that they were able to stop the immigrants, but maybe others wouldn't have been able to do it. Obviously, if these people actually got to Belarus, then presumably they were safe there and they had everything granted there, so they should have stayed in Belarus. I mean, that's just the way I see it. Also, anyway, so I've sort of there is a sort of a summary of this, and I'll go. Hang on, oh no, it's not here. So I've got it up here. I'll go through your questions. I actually did upload it. Oh, I didn't even turn it on. I normally I go on to I leave my thing open, and but I put the sound on 0 so that I can't hear myself. Okay, right. So anyway, so Apki writes, the only non-biased way of rating a party is by assigning party points. The higher the price of the USD or GBP or Euro, the more points a party gets in good old times. Yeah, in the good old times, $20 was a month's wage. Well, I can recall when I first came to Poland, $10 was a really good wage. A really good wage. So yeah, anyway. So Brian said my political bias is showing, as I mentioned. Colin says that Tusk is a career politician. I can recall in Gdansk in 1993, there was an article in the paper. It was an interview with Donald Tusk. I can't remember what he said because I don't have the thing any longer. But he was then in his 30s. He was born in 1957. There's photographs actually surfaced of him taking part in student protests, unlike, for example, Kaczynski, who, as far as I'm aware, didn't. There's a very interesting case about this, is that the grandfather of Donald Tusk was in the Wehrmacht. He was, and this is something which is used by the opposition, and the case, what was happening in the areas of Pomerania was very difficult during the Second World War, where people could be they could be declared German, and then they could be forced into the Wehrmacht or whatever. So thing is, he escaped from it, thus putting his life and possibly the life of his family in danger by doing so. Now, if we look at other people, they often say that Kaczynski, the father of Kaczynski, who was an officer in the Home Army, and surprisingly enough, that this officer in the Home Army got a very large house in an expensive area of Warsaw, Żoliborz, after the war. And that's the story they would have us believe. I don't know if it's true or not true, but if it is true, it's the only case I ever know. I know only people who got large houses were people who were possibly involved in other things. Maybe the story is true, but anyway, I have my doubts. Anyway, that apart, because I don't want to insult anybody, Kaczynski and the two Kaczynski brothers, there's a film called The Boys who stole the moon or something like that, or the twins who stole the moon. 1957, I think it was. I actually saw part of it. Oh, I found it on YouTube once and didn't watch the whole thing, but they were child stars, identical twins. Now, what type of political ideology must their parents have had to have got themselves in a film in the near Stalinist times? I don't know. Anyway, so right, okay, I'm just looking at. So Brian says that the Gordon Brown, the word I was looking for was stupid, and as well as I said, Brian was accusing me of being biased. Tusk's party is just as right wing as pieces. Dictatically, don't know what that means. Liberal, I stand corrected regarding Confederatia. Oh, sorry. So Brian accepts the fact that Confederatia is a neo-Nazi party. Okay. And John writes, as a set of 1898 encyclopedias, and there's a big section on Poland in them. I haven't read much of it, but hey, that's a good one. Yeah. Thing is like this: the concept of Poland existed even during the when Poland didn't exist. I mean, there was never any doubt that there was a Polish group, shall we call that, or whatever, even if the nation as such didn't exist. So I mean, I think there's other cases, there were other sort of groups that definitely existed, even though they nations as such. I mean, like for example, Czechs or Turkish Empire, for Ottoman Empire occupied a large part of Europe and North Africa and Asia, and so there's definitely groups in there you could say definitely existed. Arabs, for example, or Polish identity. Sorry, there's a good one. Sorry, I often see I fail myself for words. And anyway, right. Anyway, so. So Brian, it says he doesn't care less who I voted for in 2010. I'll tell you who I voted for. I mean, I wouldn't vote for them now, but I voted Conservative in 2010. That was stupid. Anyway, and Lech Wałęsa. Where is Lech Wałęsa? Yeah, he's still around. Actually, I rang him up because I wanted to do an interview with him, and unfortunately nothing happened. I was given a friend of mine who knows him give me his telephone number. So anyway, I went through the secretary. Didn't sort of ring him directly, but I wasn't able to arrange it. Now I was in Gdansk this year, and I couldn't be bothered. But I really ought to do it. Lech Wałęsa has been very much involved in the opposition to the current government. He has himself photographed all the time with his T-shirt says Konstytucja, Constitution written on it. Lech Wałęsa, I think, when he lost the election in '95, I mean, I think in many cases you had this economic downturn which happened at the end of communism, and so there's this part where things are getting restructured and all sorts of things, and this happened in many countries, and he was unable to I think I can understand that to a certain with experience. All at the time I thought it was absolutely disgusting, and but he's sort of become very much a elder statesman, I think, and even though he's uneducated, he'd worked in the steel works. He did say some daft things when he was president at times, and even he made mistakes in Polish sometimes. But sorry, standard Polish. I'm going to say if somebody makes mistakes. I do as well. I'm not suggesting that. But he was. He's definitely around. He's still doing his thing. Anyway. Right, so Brian says what I call progressive covers a multitude of sins. No, it doesn't actually. I think what progressive means is you don't want to go back in time. You want to go forward, you want to introduce new things. I do appreciate that the word progressive was also used by communists, of course, and of course communism was not progression, it was regression. Colin says the influence of the church is waning. There was only one new priest ordained the whole of the Łódź diocese last year. That I didn't know. What, only one priest in such a big area? Wow!
Okay, I am shocked. The influence is waning, and I can recall actually. There's another thing I said. I lived in I studied Spanish at university, so I lived in Spain, and you could see in Spain the churches were empty, and I think the reason for this was the way the church interfered in politics under Franco. And so the church was really important, particularly at the beginning of the Franco. If you didn't go to church, you'd get reported to the authorities, and you'd have to explain why you weren't in church. And this could end up, you could end up in prison as a result. So, but I recall in the mid '80s, so when I was in Spain, '86, I started going to Spain '86, and so the churches were empty. And I just say this: if the church doesn't change, then if it tries to interfere in politics, this is the end. It'll be the end of the church. And I think now with the things that have happened, then that is clear. That's clearly the case. Brian says Valwins is not active in politics. No, you're wrong. Actually, Brian, he is. Brian says that communists are not popular and told. Stalin himself said trying to make Poland communist like trying to put a saddle on a cow. I was in communist Poland, and yeah, it certainly wasn't very popular. It depends where you went though, because I didn't even meet people who thought it. I can remember one person I could talk to him quite freely, because I was I was a bit more radically anti-communist then than I am now, but yeah. Anyway, good. So I'm just looking through here. Sorry. I should watch the movie Sicko by a left-wing producer whose name is Mike Moore. Okay, right. I don't know. Right. Good. Sorry, I'm just trying to see thing. David says Prince Andrew should become a priest. Mohammed says thanks for sharing the video. Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks, that's very much appreciated. And sorry, I'm trying to see things I didn't state during when I was talking. Yeah, the birth rate is going down in many countries. In China, and India has passed China. Wow. Yeah. I seem to recall when I was at school, I think the population of China was like 3 times more than India or something. Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm remembering about it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Apki writes, KO, that's the Progressive Liberal Party, got that fascist Giertych elected. Maybe he can read some of the additions of his party's Liga Polski Rodzin newspaper, the Polish anti-Semite. Yeah. This person called Roman Giertych, whose politics have completely changed. He was of a party called the League of Polish Families, which had a slogan which was the same as that of Vichy France. And he was on the far right. I actually met him, and he didn't have a very good opinion. I didn't have a good opinion of him at all. Having said that, he's actually changed. He's gone now from being sort of on the far right to somewhat quite liberal. In fact, a friend of mine was saying, no. I said, no, we should have nothing to do with something like that. And he said, no, he's gone quite liberal. In fact, I did see him waving the flag during one of the protests. He was on his balcony when we went past. So yeah, but certainly he was his father was really anti-Semitic, and anyway, so Colin says there was a visa scandal which I mentioned, counted against peace, and there's a groundswell of opinion against some of the Ukrainian refugees, and think that they're not really refugees, but they're something else. Yeah, there is a certain amount of in certain quarters, I think that this war's gone on long enough, and then these refugees shouldn't be here, this type of thing. Refugees, all these foreigners coming here taking our jobs, that type of thing. I must say, there was somebody I know was complaining to me, is that she was working in a factory somewhere, and the instructions were only in Ukrainian. This was a factory in Łódź. And so, or Russian or something, she couldn't understand them. So she was one of the very few Polish people in the factory. But on the whole, people say, it's often said that these immigrants coming here taking our jobs. But it's usually in nearly all cases, the immigrants are doing jobs the locals don't want to do. And if you take the case of the United Kingdom, where one farm worker in 300 is British, and now since Brexit, the farmers can't get the workers to do it. So I don't understand why these people are saying that these foreigners are coming over here taking our jobs, aren't actually doing the jobs that the foreigners are no longer doing. But that's just my opinion. Akvi says that Donald Tusk's grandfather was in the SS. No, he wasn't. He was in the Wehrmacht. And David says many people from Gaza will become the EU. I doubt it, because they can't get out. So I don't think that will happen. And those withering influences of the church, I heard it for 30 years. Meantime, Poland, the courts, the prosecutor's office, the parliament, all of them, they'll bend their knees to Jehovah and pray for rain. Yes, that is true. So we could say that the church is less, but under this government, it has been the church. Sorry, it's elements within the church. I'm not blaming the entire church. That's not fair. But it's some of these more unpleasant elements in the church which have taken over. To blame the church as a whole is, I think, most unfair. Anyway, Mohammed writes, good luck for Polish people with the general. Good luck for you. It's a wonderful general political atmosphere that introduces. Well, thank you, Mohammed. That's very nice to actually to read. So anyway, good. Look, I've got another video to do on another channel. But thanks for watching. I hope I've sort of explained that. Obviously, I'm biased. I don't like communism. I don't like nationalism of any form, and I don't like communist system. I'm a free market capitalist, but within bounds of reason, with protections for people. So that's how I see things. So I'm sort of a progressive, and I believe that everybody should try and like each other and get on with each other, as that's the way. The thing I have against peace, and not just peace, but there's a number of other political organizations, nearly always on the right, is that they've introduced something which is hate. And I have to say, this was in I could talk to communists, and you could normally have some type of a conversation with them, but with the hate that has been introduced, I blame these elements in the church for this hatred. But this is something which is new. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to talk about. I mean, perhaps I shouldn't do this, speak until the thing's over, but I think I will talk about Gaza in the future. Sorry, what's happening in Gaza right now? It's not future. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'll talk about in the past. Sorry, just before I say this, Google Tusk's grandpa's photo from World War II. What are those skulls on the hats? Is that Jolly Roger's Fun Club? I suspect, I don't know. And why are they laughing at the photo near Vyharovo? No idea. I have no idea what the photograph is, but I suspect this may be a forgery, so I don't know. Good luck with the mobile home. It's a motorhome, not a mobile home. A mobile home in the United States is a house, one of these caravan, no, not caravan, what's it called? These houses you can sort of carry and take it somewhere else like this. And oh, my boss wants to speak to me as well. Okay, right. So I have a bus, and yeah, I shall see what she wants. And then anyway, thanks for watching. And it's on the British Archives as a description note. Okay, I'll have a look at it. Thanks for watching. We'll talk about Gaza tomorrow. All the best. Bye for now. Bye.